All right, welcome to the Online Network of Independent Learning Professionals. Today we've got Jason Stevens, who's going to be talking with us about backing up our client data. Jason is a software architect in Boulder, Colorado, and has helped me with my own business, Learning Reinvented, backing up clients' data and making sure that it's all secure, and that, you know, if I trip and fall with my laptop where I used to store my client data, that it won't be lost and all forgotten. So that's really cool. So welcome to the community, Jason. Just to get him a little oriented with like where everyone is, can you maybe put in the chat, you know, where you're located, just so he can kind of get a sense of where everyone is and just a little bit about this group. We've got Robert's in Dallas, Texas. Ashley's in Nova Scotia. I still want to visit Nova Scotia. Arvada, Danny's just down the street. John's in Denver. Cora's in Pittsburgh, Connecticut, Dallas. So like all over. So Montreal, Quebec. Oh, Dennis, great. I'm glad you're on the line, Dennis. I know that you'll probably be familiar with this and have some good input as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Jason. If anybody has questions as Jason's going through his presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. As always, we'll have a Q&A at the end, and so maybe, Jason, if you'll tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll jump on in.
Absolutely. So can you see my screen right now?
Yep, absolutely, we can.
Perfect. So my name is Jason Stevens. I'm a software architect for a high-tech company in Boulder. So I develop new software products, and specifically I work on storage products. So before my current position, I led a team at Oracle, developing an internationalized GUI for what are called SAN and NAS enterprise storage products. So basically what matters is we're talking about big data. We're talking about credit card companies, government agencies. They have lots of data. They need to store it reliably, securely. They need to know that it's not going to be lost. And so these are the systems that I've been working on for the past decade. We're not going to be going into those enterprise systems so much in this presentation, but we will be talking about what matters when you're looking at data storage solutions, and we will be looking at what a comprehensive data protection plan looks like and how you can implement it yourselves on a small scale. And so that's a little bit about me. Should I go into anything more, Patty, or?
No, that is good. And, you know, it might be a good question to ask as you're kind of getting into this to the community here, you know, where do you currently store your client data? So maybe just put that in the chat as Jason, you know, continues on. It'd be interesting to see where we all currently do that. So yeah, that's good. Feel free to continue on there, Jason.
Yeah, and Patty, I think let's actually come back to the responses that come up later on in this presentation. I think that would actually be very interesting. Or actually, I guess I can see it here, and there's a, well, we'll come back to that. So, so data, how do you store it and how do you protect it? So those are the two biggest questions that we have, and they are different questions because where and how you protect the data does not necessarily have to be where you store your primary copy. And in a lot of cases, they're not going to be the same, and we'll see why as we get into this a little bit more. And so when we're talking about data storage and data storage solutions, we're really talking mostly about these 6 items. And so we're going to be talking about these 6 items as we're going through the rest of the presentation. So I want to describe what these 6 things are and what they mean to you. So the first one is scalability. Scalability means, well, how much capacity is there? So this is when a hard drive says, oh, well, it's 1 terabyte or it's 4 terabytes. So it's the size of the storage system. And so the more data that you have, especially if you have video content or large files, the more scalability you need, the more capacity you need. The next one is performance. So performance is an interesting thing because for some things you don't need it, and for some things you do. So it depends on what you're doing. If you're working on Word documents or PowerPoints or things like that, you really don't need a whole lot of performance. If you're rendering video content, you probably do need a lot of performance, at least where you are doing that actual rendering, where you're generating that video content. Whereas just playing back a video, you really don't need a lot of performance. And so, well, what does performance really mean? I mean, we all understand a terabyte versus 4 terabytes. Well, performance usually comes down to a couple of things. One thing is, a lot of you have heard of SSDs. They stand for solid state drives. And a lot of you are using what are called traditional hard drives, where there's a spindle that rotates at 7,200 RPMs or 5,400 RPMs. Those hard drives are larger. They're also cheaper. So they have more capacity. They're physically larger than an SSD, and they're also usually cheaper than an SSD. SSDs are going to be a lot faster. They're going to give you better performance. We'll go into how performance comes into play a bit more as we go later on in this presentation, because there are ways that performance can be impacted beyond just the type of hard drive technology you choose, whether it's an SSD or whether it's a traditional rotating hard drive. The next one is durability. As the word suggests, durability is referring to, well, how likely is it that that data is going to actually be safely retained? If I come back a year later and I try to retrieve that data, is it still going to be there? Or will that storage system have failed? Integrity is very much related to durability from the sounds of it, but it's actually something very different. So integrity is saying, when I do go to get back my data, if the data is there, is it potentially corrupted? So durability is referring to, is it there? Whereas integrity is referring to, am I getting back the right data when the data is there? So they are very different things, even though they sound very similar. Security, you know, we're all very familiar with all the security issues that are getting into the press and how important computer security is today. Can somebody gain access to your data when you don't want them to? And of course, cost. Most of the people who are dialed into this, who are watching, definitely have cost limitations. You can't go out and purchase a $100,000 enterprise data storage appliance. You're working with very small budgets in terms of how you do store this data and how you protect it. And so the solutions that we will look at are going to be very cost conscientious. So the first thing we're going to look at is a local hard drive and how it stacks up with all these things. And I'm going to take a look at this chat window and see how are people backing up their data right now. It's not coming up for me. Patty, can you tell me what people are saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Dropbox, ShareFile, Code 42, which I've not heard of. Interesting, Cora. And then I think we've got SharePoint, Google Drive. I mean, Ashley backs up all over. External hard drive ×2, Apple Time Capsule, Dropbox, Google Drive.
Okay. So let's, that's a pretty good list of items. And the one I want to tackle first is the local hard drive. So this is speaking to Ashley's comment of using external hard drives. This is also for those of you who don't back up your data. So if you have, let's say, a laptop or a desktop that you work on, and you have your data on that laptop or desktop, you're using a local hard drive. So local doesn't mean that it's internal or external. It just means that it's a hard drive that you have locally in your possession. And it could be external or internal. It could be an SSD or a traditional hard drive, and you're putting data onto that local hard drive. So let's talk about how this would actually play out. And then we'll take a look at Dropbox and some of those other things. So scalability, well, if you choose an SSD, you can go up to about 2 terabytes. If you go with a rotating hard drive, a traditional hard drive, You can go up to 4 to 8 terabytes. And if you're willing to go with what's called an SMR drive, which is a shingled media hard drive, which I'm guessing most of you probably are not using, that can get you even higher, but it has some significant performance penalties. As is often the case with hard drives, performance is inversely correlated with scalability. What that means is the larger the hard drive, the slower it's going to run. An SSD is going to be extremely fast, whereas a rotating hard drive is going to be much slower. And a shingled media drive is going to be even slower than that, especially under certain circumstances. Durability. Well, the annual failure rate of a hard drive is, depending on who you believe and what technology you're using, it's going to generally be around 1 to 2%. So what that means is that if you have just a laptop or a PC that you store all of your customer data on, and you don't back it up anywhere, you are taking about a 1 to 2% risk each year that you lose all of that data. Integrity. Integrity is an interesting thing when we talk about local hard drives. Almost for sure, everybody who's using a local hard drive is using what's called a consumer hard drive. So there are consumer and enterprise hard drives, and they have different characteristics when it comes to durability and integrity, but they especially have different characteristics when it comes to integrity. The durability, they really don't have much of a difference. The wear levels for SSDs, so a lot of you have heard of, I'm sure, of wearing issues with SSDs, where if you write to them so much, they stop working. That used to be a really big problem. Nowadays, it's really mostly solved. You know, you could buy a consumer SSD, and it's very unlikely that you would write so much data to it to where you would actually run into those wearing issues. So for those of you who are concerned about SSDs from the wearing, that really is a problem more of the past. You can run into it today, but for the applications that everybody on this call is going to be involved in, it's probably not something to be concerned about. So back to integrity. Typically speaking, if you're looking at a rotating consumer hard drive, let's say that it's 2 terabytes. If you fill up that 2 terabyte hard drive all the way, and then you come back around, let's say a month later, and you try to read all of that data back, it is almost for sure that at least 1 bit of data in that hard drive has been corrupted. So think about what that means. That means that if I have 2 terabytes of data that I've written out to a hard drive, it is almost guaranteed that I have at least 1 bit of corruption across that 2 terabytes. Now, normally, this 1 bit of corruption is not going to be a big deal. Applications are designed to deal with this. If you have a 1-bit corruption in a JPEG image, for example, it's just going to render 1 pixel a little bit off, but you're not going to notice, almost for sure. On the other hand, some of you may have experienced data integrity issues where you did notice. Maybe you tried to open up a Word document or Outlook or something like that, and you got a strange error message saying that there was something wrong with the file. Well, that would be a data integrity issue that could not be auto-recovered from. So data integrity is something that local hard drives definitely are susceptible to. Next thing is security. Well, if it's a local hard drive, we're really talking about, well, how secure is it physically, as well as how secure is your computer? Can somebody get in that way? And then cost. Local hard drive is also going to be the cheapest storage solution. It's just a single hard drive. Whether you go SSD or rotating, I mean, it's a single hard drive. You don't have the protection with durability or integrity because you're not paying for protection. It's going to be the lowest cost. And let's talk briefly about, well, I'm going to actually save Dropbox and some of those others for later. So let's talk about, well, what does a comprehensive data plan look like? And this is really the purpose of this presentation and what we're going to be looking at. So a local hard drive is great for what we call active data. And active data means what you're currently working with. So you might have 4 or 5 different clients, and you might have 10 or 12 different projects. and maybe you have 50 other projects that you've worked on in the past. Well, you don't need those 50 projects to all be on your local hard drive. You do need your active projects to be on your local hard drive, because when you go off to your coffee shop or when you want to work on that stuff, you want it to be quick, you want it to be right there and accessible, and you want your higher performance. And so generally speaking, what makes the most sense for your local hard drive is go with an SSD. An SSD is going to give you great performance. It's not going to have a whole lot of capacity. You might only have, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, you're probably only going to have a terabyte at the most of SSD capacity. And so you're going to need some place to potentially offload other stuff. Now, if you're only working on Word documents and files that really aren't that large, you may not need to have this additional step of FreeNAS that we're going to talk about. But for those of you who are dealing with video content or any files that are very large, you might have more than a terabyte of data, and so you can't store everything off of on your local hard drive. And so FreeNAS is a wonderful local long-term data preservation solution. And as I said, we'll be looking at that in more detail later on in this presentation of how you set that up and how it works and what its value is to you. And then the third thing that you would want to look at, and this is something you would want to look at whether or not you have a lot of data, is some sort of a disaster recovery solution. And really what we're talking about with disaster recovery is, well, you really want maximum durability and you want maximum integrity. You want to know that that data is not going to be lost in your backup solution. And you also want to know that it's not going to become corrupted. It doesn't matter if it's low performance to get to it, because this is your disaster recovery solution. So, you know, you're only going to use this if your laptop gets stolen or lost, or if the hard drive dies. And going back to durability, we may say, well, the failure rate of a hard drive is 1% to 2% per year, but your laptop could be stolen or it could be damaged. That's not accounted for. And so your actual risk is higher than that 1% to 2% if you consider those additional factors. So let's take a look at FreeNAS. So what do you need in order to use FreeNAS? Well, first of all, you have to have enough data to make it be worthwhile. If you only have a couple hundred gigabytes of data, this is going to be overkill. So really what we're looking at with FreeNAS is, you know, you really need to have at least a terabyte of data, or anticipate having at least a terabyte of data. FreeNAS is scalable up to hundreds of terabytes of data. The solution that we'll be looking at here is really intended to be scaled to smaller numbers than that, but you can certainly scale it larger. So you'll need FreeNAS, which is a free software download, and you go to www.freenas.org and you're able to download it. You also need a network switch or a wireless access point. We'll go into details as to when you would want to choose one of those solutions or another. And then you need to have some sort of a storage server, which needs to be an enterprise class computer. We'll describe what that means and how you can acquire one for cheap. So the image down below, that diagram, shows you a simple configuration of how you would hook all of this stuff up together. So your laptop would be on the left, and then your enterprise class storage server would be on the right. You'd need to have a network switch in between and two network cables. One network cable to hook up your storage server to your network switch, and one network cable to hook up your laptop to the network switch. So that way they're all on the network together. So what does FreeNAS buy you? And then we'll go into details of how you would configure this and how much it would cost and how it would work. So scalability, we already talked about that a little bit. You know, this is massively scalable. It's scalable beyond anything you would need to go to. The solutions we'll look at in terms of how to build out these solutions are limited to 4 hard drives. Talking with Patty, it sounds like that's about the maximum that folks in this group would need to go to. In a RAID 10, that gets you 8 terabytes or 16 terabytes of usable capacity. In a RAID 5, that gets you 12 to 16 terabytes of usable capacity. If there is anybody here who needs more capacity than that, please say so in the chat window. And Patty, if somebody does say so, let me know so that I can cover how you would do that. Otherwise, I'll assume that that is sufficient for everybody in this group. Performance. It really depends on whether you load up this box with SSDs or rotating hard drives, but FreeNAS is really designed to give you excellent performance even if you're using cheaper hard drives. And so that's part of the beauty of this, is that you can purchase cheaper rotating hard drives and still get very good performance characteristics getting to your data. And we'll see that in a moment. Durability. So there are two different RAID levels that you can use when you're setting up your FreeNAS. Again, I want everybody to think in terms of you'd be buying 4 hard drives that you would be putting into the storage server. And so there are 2 ways that you can configure these 4 hard drives. One of them is what's called a RAID 10, which is mirroring. The second way is RAID 5, which is called parity. If you choose RAID 10, you'll get better performance. If you choose RAID 5, you'll get more capacity. Excuse me. So with a RAID 10, 2 of the hard drives have data, and then the other 2 hard drives mirror the exact same data. What that means is that in order for you to lose data, you would have to have 2 hard drives die within the same mirror pair. That's extremely unlikely. If you think about it, let's say that the annual failure rate of a hard drive is 2%. Well, it's 2% of 2% that you would have 2 hard drives fail within the same year. So we're not talking about a 1% chance. We're talking about 1 over 50 times 50. So that's what, about a 1 in 2,500 probability. So your durability is actually really good with a RAID 10. With a RAID 5, your probability is going to be not as good. RAID 10 will be slightly better, but it's also going to be extremely good. And if you replace a failed hard drive in a timely manner, your durability gets even better. That 1 in 2,500 turns into 1 in 20,000 or 1 in 50,000. So your durability can be extremely high. So what about integrity? Well, FreeNAS uses something called ZFS. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what ZFS is, but I will say that ZFS is what the big guys use. So this is what Oracle uses. This is what a lot of very enterprise class systems use to provide very high levels of data integrity. So we're talking about when one of those data corruptions occurs on your consumer hard drive, not a problem. ZFS will automatically detect and correct that problem. So that not only is the corruption detected, but it is automatically corrected and fixed on the hard drive and in the data that is sent back to you. So this is a very, very high data integrity solution, much better than having just a regular local hard drive.
Jason, is
sorry, is there a question?
Virtual? Yes. Is VFS virtual file system, or what is VFS?
I'm sorry, I said ZFS. Z is in Zulu. So if I go back a slide, if you take a look at this down here, what is FreeNAS and what is ZFS? It is not VFS, it is ZFS.
I see. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, VFS is very different from that. We're not going to go into VFS. So then security, again, this comes back to how secure is it physically, how secure is it from a software side. FreeNAS is going to be pretty secure from a software side because you access your data over what's called a CIS share or an NFS share. And this is how you access remote data in an enterprise organization. And it's very easy to set this up. You go to My Computer in Windows and you just say map a network drive, and then you basically type in the information for your FreeNAS storage server, and then it connects. And then it's kind of like you have an extra hard drive on your computer. It'll show up as a network drive, and then you just double click on it, and then it's essentially this massive hard drive that you can store all of your data on. So it kind of looks like an external hard drive, but it's not. It's a mapped network drive, and you access it using what's called a NAS share, which again is either a CIFS or an NFS share. If you're using Windows, it'll be CIFS. If you're using Linux, it would be NFS. If you're using Mac, you have the option to use either one. So let's talk about cost. Well, the cost of free NAS is actually pretty good, because really what you're looking at is you have to buy 4 hard drives. You can buy cheap consumer hard drives, so you don't have any extra cost there. Now, you do have to pay a little bit extra because you're paying to have this high durability. So you have 4 hard drives, but you don't get 4 hard drives worth of space. So for example, if I have 1 terabyte hard drives that I'm buying, and I put them into a RAID 10, well, that means I have 2 terabytes of usable capacity, even though I have 4 terabytes of actual raw hard disk space. And again, that's so that I can have the mirroring. So I have 2 terabytes between 2 hard drives, and then I mirror and duplicate that data across the other 2 hard drives. So it gives me excellent durability. But again, because these consumer hard drives are so cheap, the cost point of this is quite excellent. The company that I work for, just to give you an example, the cheapest NAS appliances that we offer start off at $20,000. And so to be able to build a system like this for around $1,000 to $2,000 is actually extremely cheap compared to what you would normally have to pay to build an enterprise class system like this. So now let's talk about, well, how do you want to hook this up on your network? So we talked about a wired network versus a wireless network. And when we're talking about network performance, we need to talk about 2 things. One is bandwidth, and the other is latency. And the way that I want you to think about this is think of a hose. Latency would mean that I have a longer hose. What that means is that once if I want to hook it up to a fire hydrant, once I turn on the fire hydrant, I could be waiting 10 seconds before water starts coming out of the hose if it's a really long hose. That's high latency. Low latency would mean that the hose is very short. So when I turn on the fire hydrant, the water starts coming out of the hose very, very soon. Bandwidth is how large that hose is. So if I have a really big fire hose, and I got a lot of pressure coming from the fire hydrant, that's a high bandwidth hose. I'm able to get lots of water coming through. But if it's a very small hose, that's a low bandwidth hose because not much water is going to come through. So to give you some examples, if I have a high bandwidth but low latency connection, that's like having a really big hose, but it's very long. So once the water starts coming out, I got lots of water, but I'm going to have to wait a long time before that water actually starts coming out. If I have a high, well, I think we get the idea with the hose analogy. So going on to a wired network versus a wireless network. Well, a wired network is going to be higher bandwidth. It is going to also be reliably higher bandwidth. A wired network is going to have lower latency. It will also have reliably lower latency. What I mean when I say reliably is that a wireless network is going to have more variation in terms of what the bandwidth and the latency are, depending on various changing characteristics going on in the environment. And so if you really care about bandwidth and latency, the bottom line is you need to go with a wired solution. So get yourself a gigabit network switch. They're very cheap. Make sure that the storage server and your laptop both have gigabit network adapters. Again, those are very cheap. You know, it does not cost a lot of money to put that together. A network switch that's a gigabit switch might cost you $50 on Amazon. The network cards, most computers already have gigabit these days, so you probably don't have to spend any money on that. So as I said, very cheap. If you do very much prefer the convenience of having the mobility and want to go with wireless, you can do that as well. You can either hook up your free NAS using a wire to a wireless access point, or you can have both of them be wireless. I would not recommend having the free NAS be wireless. Generally speaking, you want to at least have the free NAS hooked up with a hard wire going to your wireless access point that your laptop comes into. So, storage server selection. So what's the difference between a consumer and an enterprise computer? Well, there are a lot of differences. I'm going to give you one example. So an enterprise computer has what's called error correction controlled RAM, or ECC RAM. What this is it is RAM that is designed to work kind of like ZFS and FreeNAS, which is that it automatically detects and corrects corruption that occurs in memory. And this actually happens more often than you might think. It's the reason why your computer, after you leave it running for a long time, sometimes it starts becoming a little bit wonky, and you have to reboot it, and after you reboot it, it runs fine. Well, sometimes what's happened is something in memory has become corrupted, and the reboot reinitializes all that stuff, and the corruption goes away. With an enterprise computer, it's designed to run 24/7. It's designed to run for years without ever being rebooted. And it's designed to do that because it has error correction control in place for its various hardware components. A cheap and old enterprise computer is going to be better than a new consumer computer for a storage server. So here are some examples of storage servers that you can buy. If you're on a budget, the Z400 or Z600 or Z800 HP workstation would be a wonderful choice. The Z800 will easily store 4 hard drives. Those other smaller ones will potentially hold less, or you'll have to have the hard drive sort of hanging in the case, which may or may not be a big deal. You can pick up a Z800 for a few $100. So they're not that expensive. You'd have to pick it up on eBay. It's an older computer. If you want something that's a little bit more modern, you can go for a Z420, 620, or 820. And then you have to decide how much performance you want. For most of you, traditional rotating hard drives will be the way to go. It's going to be a lot cheaper. It's still going to give you good performance. And this is really what FreeNAS is for, is they have ZFS to mitigate issues with consumer hard drives so that you don't have to deal with it, and ZFS will overcome those shortcomings and give you the higher durability and data integrity. So now that we've talked about FreeNAS, before we go on to S3 Doctor, I want to ask if there are any questions about FreeNAS that anybody would like answered.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or ask them out loud. Either way, we'll give you just a couple of minutes to get those in if you've got any so far. And again, we'll open up questions and more of a lively discussion at the end if anybody has just any specific questions. All right, feel like you can go ahead and continue on.
Okay. So the next part of our data protection plan, if we remember that slide from a while back, is what about disaster recovery? So the problem with FreeNAS is that, well, what if the building burns down? That NAS appliance will probably be sitting in your apartment or your house, and it could be physically destroyed. So for a lot of you, you might say, well, the probability of that is actually really low. And so especially if you take physical security precautions with your FreeNAS, if you lock it away somewhere or do something to protect it, this might be enough for you. You know, you might be satisfied with having just your FreeNAS appliance and not having any additional DR. If you don't have enough data to justify having a FreeNAS, you might be interested in just doing a DR solution and not having a FreeNAS solution. If you're very concerned about your data and you want to be absolutely certain that it cannot be lost, and you have a lot of data, then you're really looking at having to do both of these. So, and what's the difference between DR and FreeNAS? Well, FreeNAS gives you high performance local connectivity to your data. And so that way you can get to your data pretty quickly. A disaster recovery solution is going to give you the lowest cost to store the data, and it's going to give you the maximum durability, but it's not going to give you very good performance. So a DR solution is not intended to be used regularly to get your data. It's intended to be used to back up your data to it and hopefully never have to retrieve your data back. So S3DR is using the Amazon Web Services S3 platform. So let me describe what this is. So there are a bunch of different cloud providers out there. Dropbox is one, Google Drive is another, Amazon S3 is another. There are a bunch of them. And the storage solution that you choose depends on a number of factors, what you're familiar with, what's easy to use. Google Drive actually is not bad. That is not a bad way to back up your data. The idea behind S3DR is to provide an easy way for you to be able to back up your data, but not just back it up, but also to encrypt it, compress it, and bundle it, and to do this in an automated manner. And so it's a little bit different from Google Drive and some of these other cloud solutions, because most of those other cloud solutions are manual, number one, and number two, they don't provide encryption, compression, and bundling. And what do those really provide you as a benefit? So encryption, what that provides you as a benefit is that nobody can access that data except for you. You have to have that encryption key in order for you to be able to access the data. So S3 Doctor uses military-grade encryption algorithms to ensure that nobody's able to access that data. Compression, what does that do? Well, that reduces your bill with the cloud storage provider. If I have a terabyte of data, but it's compressible down to, let's say, 400 gigabytes of data, now the cloud provider charges you for 400 gigabytes instead of a terabyte. So that saves you money. Same thing with bundling, saves you money. So encryption is really for security, and the compression and bundling are really more for cost savings to you. So why Amazon S3? And Amazon Web Services S3 is often referred to in short as just Amazon S3. So Amazon S3 is highly, highly durable. If you take a look and you Google Amazon S3 and read up about it, you'll find that it's actually a very cheap, but also incredibly durable, incredibly high data integrity cloud provider solution. And so the problem with a number of cloud providers is that they either have security issues, or they have durability issues, or they have data integrity issues. And security and data integrity issues are the most common issues that you can find with a lot of cloud providers out there. And so really what S3 Doctor is designed to do, and that stands for S3 Disaster Recovery, by the way, is it's designed to overcome and mitigate those issues in the cloud. And so it uses a highly durable, high data integrity cloud provider solution, which is Amazon S3, but then it layers the military-grade encryption on top of it to ensure that not even Amazon employees have the ability to actually get to your data. So it ensures that all of that data is extremely protected and also that it is kept confidential. And so let's take a look at S3DR. So I'm going to go to S3DR.com. And this software, all the software I'm showing you, by the way, is free.
That is my favorite price.
Yes, indeed. So this is the home page, and it describes why S3DR is a good solution. This shows you how the data is actually sent to the cloud. So you have a diagram of how that happens. If you go to the download link, you're able to download this. It is free software, so there is no warranty on this. Of course, that text shows up on just about any software, even paid software. The Microsoft Windows license agreement is actually quite funny if you read the whole thing. I think that there was some verbiage in there a while back about it not being an operating system. But anyway, we have instructions on here about how you would set up S3DR and how you would use it. And it's just really a matter of going through these steps in terms of setting it up. And then once it's set up, it will automatically back things up for you. So that gives you sort of an idea of a comprehensive data plan. So again, what we covered is we went over local hard drive storage for active data. And an SSD will give you maximum performance, but it doesn't give you a lot of capacity. And so for the extra capacity, you can use a free NAS solution, and that will scale to many terabytes of capacity very easily in a very performant manner, but also with enterprise-level durability and data integrity. And then for disaster recovery, S3DR provides you with a very high durability, very high data integrity, and also a very low-cost solution for doing disaster recovery off-site. And that's it. I will open it up to any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jason, for that information. This is a really important topic. That's why I wanted to bring it up with the community. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get it to where I'm going to stop sharing your screen and can see everyone here. So what questions do you guys have? And I think the other thing that I'd like to talk about is, you know, if you currently are backing up clients' data, or maybe you're not, but you're not sure if you're doing it in the best way and you just have some specific questions. The goal is for all of us to be backing up client data and you know what we're doing, and also be thinking about what Jason was saying with like active projects, where are they, versus projects that are completed, where are they? So any questions off the bat or things you want to discuss? And then I'm also going to mention that Danny had a really good question about how many of us have insurance that cover hardware liability umbrella. So that, I think, is a really good idea. I don't have that either, but we kind of chatted about that. And I'm going to actually, Danny, are you on audio? I'm going to kind of switch over to you for a second to kind of get your thoughts. Oh, my goodness. To get your thoughts about this topic and maybe explain a little bit more about that insurance that you have.
Yeah, so you know, the reason I have insurance is because I have 2 clients who require insurance as part of their master services agreement. One of them requires a ridiculous amount, especially for the type of work that we do. But it covers like that professional liability, it covers copyright issues. It covers, you know, if I were to hire a subcontractor who, you know, didn't follow copyright and the client ever came after me, it protects me from all kinds of stuff, theft from employees, theft from just general theft that homeowners wouldn't cover. So it's all that professional liability stuff. You know, when I think you're doing instructional design for really technical content, it's important that, I think it's important to have. It is expensive. You can probably start small. I mean, like the requirements that one of my clients requires, it's like $1 million policy. It's insane. But they've brought me a lot of work, so I have to just bite the bullet. And it does include data loss. So if you lose data or, you know, computer gets stolen or whatever, you're still like, I'm going to still cry about it for days, but at least from a legal perspective, I'm covered and can get that loss recouped a little bit. So I was just curious. I mean, I think I run into people who have it and who don't have it. And quite frankly, I didn't have it for years. And then I got a couple of clients who required it. So that was for me. I personally back up all of our data. We're a remote team, and so we back up everything. We used to use Dropbox, but it had some security issues that came about a couple of years ago. I used to use their team account and pay for it. But I switched over to Citrix ShareFile, and I packaged in. They acquired Right Signature, so now when we do all our contracts, they're all electronic. And ShareFile has been a great solution because it does version control. I can go back, I can see a log of who checked out different files. And every time I turn around, they've added something new. Like now there's an approval process if we need an approval process for a document. It also doesn't get Dropbox. I was also running into clients getting blocked. So when I would put their content out there, their IT departments would block Dropbox. So ShareFile, I've never had a client not be able to get there. It also allows you to send really large documents via email. And I use their little Windows Explorer add-in so that I can save right to my Windows Explorer folders on that ShareFile network, and it automatically syncs up. So that seems to work well for us, and is a good solution. You know, I mentioned that even your external hard drives that you're backing up to, those can die too. I bought that terabyte external hard drive on a Black Friday, and it was like a wicked deal. I got a terabyte for like $100, and that was, somebody had said they used to be $600, and they did. It's getting cheaper and cheaper, but it was way too old, and I hadn't backed up all those files, and it wasn't the end of the world if I lost some of them, because I've started putting in my contracts. I have one client who has had a lot of turnover, and I swear once a year they come back to me for files they should have. And I happen to have them on this external hard drive, but I've started putting in my contracts that one of their responsibilities is to download all source files within 30 days. That way I can start cleaning up my files. Oh, I mean, I have files from 2010, 2011, and I feel like it's only my responsibility for so long, and then at some point I have to purge. So I've started putting that in my statement of works, that's one of their responsibilities. And that has sort of helped. Because I have this one client who I swear once a year they come back to me and ask for all these files again. So they clearly don't have backup. So
yeah.
Anyway.
Wow. You know what? I hadn't thought of that. That's a really great thing. Like how putting a clause for how long, you will store their files.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Yeah, we've got a few questions. Dawn had a couple of questions. She's got a regular S3 account, and she's asking, and this is a question for Jason, is this good enough for someone who's new and doesn't have a lot of data currently? And she's also asking, what's the difference between an Amazon S3 account and the S3 Doctor? How does that connect?
So that's a very good question. This is explained in the documentation on the S3DR website, but there is no account for the S3DR. So the only account that you have to have is an Amazon Web Services account. And once you have an Amazon Web Services account, you can use S3 or you can use whatever you want. So if you already have an AWS account, then you basically get to skip that step of setting that up. Now, you still have to get your user credentials, so you have to generate access keys. So there's a secret key and there's an access key. You still do have to get those, and you have to provide those to S3DR so that it can use that to actually perform the data replication.
And I will also add to that I mean, the cost for uploading all of my data, which is a lot. I mean, it's like all the clients that I've worked with over, a year's period of time. That's, heavy video projects and story files and whatnot. It's like $1.50 a month. So that's pretty darn cheap. Okay. So next question is, and Dawn, if you have any other questions or need clarification, let me know. Okay, she says great, thanks, perfect. So John has a question about how do you upload large volumes of data to the cloud in a reasonable amount of time without enterprise level broadband. He tried Carbonite for a 2 terabyte drive, and the trial period was half expired by the time he uploaded 10% of his data.
That is a very, very good question. This is one of the places where S3DR shines, is that it is designed specifically to work without enterprise-level internet connectivity. And so the way that it accomplishes that is by doing bundling and also by doing compression. But bundling is the primary strategy. So the way that that works is that we use a variable-sized bundle when uploading to S3 between 10 megabytes and 100 megabytes. That way, if there is packet loss or something goes wrong with that internet connection, even if it's a 2 terabyte file, it doesn't matter because you don't have to restart the whole thing. You only have to restart the 100 megabyte segment. And so the issue that you're describing, just so we're clear and everybody understands, is that if you try to upload a 2 terabyte thing as one thing, it's possible that you will never be able to upload it, because if you look at the percent rate of packet loss, you have almost a 100% chance of having at least one packet that gets lost or corrupted in transmission over that 2 terabyte window. But if you break that up into 100 megabyte segments, now you significantly reduce, you basically solve the problem, because now when that issue occurs, you only have to retransmit up to 100 megabytes. And because you have these segments, it means that once you successfully transmit a full 100 meg, there's no case in which you would have to retransmit that 100 meg.
Great, thank you for that explanation. And then Robert has a question, and this is either for Danny or Jason, either one. I know Danny had mentioned some security issues with Dropbox, but could you talk about like why not use Dropbox and how that compares to other cloud services such as like Google Drive or Box?
So Dropbox has a number of security issues also, and I think this was brought up, and it's a good point. A lot of enterprise companies block Dropbox due to some of those issues. In general, a lot of cloud providers do not have good, what are called end-to-end CRC guarantees, which are required for good data integrity guarantees. Amazon S3 provides excellent data integrity guarantees, and S3 Doctor uses those APIs to ensure data integrity. But if you look at a lot of cloud providers out there, they simply don't have that. So it's really hit and miss depending on which cloud provider you're talking about.
Yeah, and I can say just from experience, that was totally my issue. Is I had clients who started blocking Dropbox because of that. And so my clients could never get to files that I was posting. I do know ShareFile, Citrix ShareFile has 256-bit encryption and has some data guarantees as well. And it's a Citrix product, so it was, it costs though. It's a cost that you have to incur, but for us, it's been a good solution. And like I said, all my clients can get there, even my financial client who can't get anywhere. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Another advantage of ShareFile, just so that everybody knows this, is that ShareFile solves the distribution use case. So everything that I've been talking about in this presentation is about storing your own data and protecting your own data. I did not cover anything about distribution. How do you get it out to your customers? And so ShareFile is actually a good solution, especially for that distribution case. But I will also add that especially as the amount of data that you have scales, you may find that using a combination of S3 Doctor for disaster recovery, in addition to using ShareFile for distribution, might make the most sense.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. And I remember that, how do we get that to a client versus where are we storing it? How are we backing it up? Okay, so Dennis has a question, so I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to Dennis. Over to you.
Hi, thanks, Patty. So there's been a lot of talk on this subject about cloud storage. Where I'm concerned about cloud storage is that when I'm backing up clients' data, based on the US state or the Canadian province, different laws pertain to where that actual data is physically stored, i.e. if I'm in Canada, and my data contains a ton of personal information by my clients. The concern there is that I'm actually, it's illegal for me to store that data outside of Canada. So how can we guarantee, even through your company, how can we guarantee our data is not going to be distributed throughout different countries?
So that's a good question. There are a couple of different answers to that. One of them is that for certain things, there's something called Amazon GovCloud, and that's when you're dealing with classified material that is classified by a government agency.
That's a U.S. government agency only, though, in that case, right?
Yes, that is U.S. only, and there are also very particular requirements in terms of who is allowed to use GovCloud. So you have to, for example, be a natural citizen, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're dealing with U.S. classified material, classified by the Department of Defense or something like that, you can use S3DR with GovCloud. As a general answer to your question of, specifically like if I'm in Canada, how do I know where that's going to go? There are different regions that you can use. And then those regions will dictate where that data is actually being stored. Now, there are regions in the U.S. I'm actually looking now to see what regions there are outside of the U.S. And I do not see anything in Canada yet. There probably is a region in Canada. I just don't. I'm not seeing it yet. There are a lot of regions that you have to pick from, though. So that would be a possibility.
Right. Just from a security hierarchical perspective, if we look at the level of security required for data, the U.S. would be the base security. Canada is one step higher, and then the EU is a huge leap higher. I mean, they have some massive security requirements for their data. Are you guys able to deal?
And there are regions in the EU. I will say that there are regions in the EU that you can use.
Yeah, you're right. There are a few, yeah. Okay, so I was just curious about if, how that was being addressed, because as I previously mentioned, here in Canada, if you've got personal data, essentially your bottom line is don't bother attempting to store that personal data in the US, as an example. And this varies province by province. British Columbia has the strongest laws in Canada related to that. So just thought I'd ask that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Good question.
Well, you guys, our time is up, but thanks for coming and participating and learning about backing up your data. Let's all thank Jason Chatlove for preparing this presentation and speaking with us about this, sharing his knowledge about the topic. Like I said, it's a very important one. So making sure that you're backing up data. I've known many, many people that's had a lot of issues just from not doing this one, simple thing. Robert says he loves it. Wonderful. All right. Well, we will see everyone in a couple of weeks. Until then, have a wonderful couple of weeks and a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again, Jason. Bye.
Yep. Thank you.